Okay, great. Okay.
Okay, so what we're going to do basically is that I'll introduce you to Mr. Sheldon Kay in a few minutes, and then we'll turn it over to him, and he'll conduct the interview, and I may chime in occasionally with a question or two.
Great.
Okay?
Are you able to hear Myron okay?
I hear him fine. Yeah, I
Great.
see him fine. And
Tell me
he,
when
he has a white beard, so he must be a good guy.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody has a white beard in this.
You know,
Yeah.
does it look familiar?
you know what? He said something. I have this book here called Lonely Avenue that I was reading,
Yes.
and I looked at the cover. Myron said you kind of look like him with the beard a little bit. So it's kind of
You do, yeah.
yeah. So
You,
that's
you know,
really,
you know that book got a full page review in the Sunday New York Times book review section, and a hit review. The guy fell in love with the book.
oh, it's fantastic. There was just so much to know, but so much to know about you. I mean, your career as a famous attorney. That's how I knew about you because I saw you on CNN many times talking about divorce law. And
I learned things about my brother all the time. Oh, let me turn this off. I'm sorry.
but
Uh, uh,
the magic
oh,
moment. There you go.
yeah, that's it. That's it. The what do you call it thing?
The drifters.
Yeah. Um, the, the there's a song called "This a Cottage for Sale."
Okay.
It's a terrific song by two unknown songwriters from the 30s, early 40s. The roses we planted are covered with dust. The sign on the door of a cottage for sale. You know, and Dinah Washington made a record. Frank Sinatra made a record. The best record is Judy Garland with only a piano playing. Uh, and so this guy is writing. He said, and my brother was up in his room with Phil Spector. And when this fellow went in, they were playing. My brother was singing, and Phil Spector was playing on the guitar. A Cottage for Sale. I know because Phil Spector, I knew well because he used to come to the house. I never heard him any kind of inclination to that kind of music. And my brother had a very good, uh, maybe tenor, you would call it, voice. And of course, we grew up, and I've heard him sing many times. Then he became a blues singer, and he did that kind of music. But and we sang together, except I had no voice. He had a voice. Um, anyway, so let's talk.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Felder, for agreeing for this interview. We're excited to meet you and to do this interview. I'd like to now introduce you to our host, Sheldon Kay, local and well-known Detroit attorney, accomplished musician, band leader, radio personality, um, and overall good guy, and pandemic beer grower. So say hello to Sheldon Kay.
are you funny? Yes, that's what happened. Oh, my mom, Ella, if she saw me, she would say, Shelly, cut your beard. That's what she would say. But that's all right. My dad, who's 98, likes it. You know, he's got a beard too now, so it's pretty cool. You
And
know?
my brother had a beard too, as you know.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, how I got interested in this is first I want to talk about you.
Yeah.
You know, I saw you on CNN many times, and then I saw that you had a book called Schmucks with
Yes.
Jackie Mason and yourself, and I bought the book. Jackie Mason is my favorite comedian of all time, and so I read the book, and then I saw that you've written many other books.
Yeah.
Survival Guide to New York City, you wrote.
That's what Jackie also.
Okay, and then Dancers on a Dark Street, you wrote. What's that about?
That's a book of short stories, very well received, uh, but it never sold anything. It had a blurb from what's this lady author? They always name her for the Nobel Prize. She's never gotten it. Joyce Carol Oates.
Oh,
I never met her, but she said uh, she never gives endorsements, and she thought the book was terrific and sensitive and all that stuff. Um, we had a very odd experience with the book. If if you want to chat a second about it, the there's a short story there that's a very simple short story. I forget the name. It's about a woman who owns a diner, and it's at a place called oh damn if I the name is important. Uh, Hope. It's right near a town called Hope.
Okay.
Um, and um, she used to say it had no fire department. The fire department came from Hope, the police department. Anyway, it was a very small town. And then, and she had this dog that would practically only had the run of the mill of this diner, and everybody accepted this dog. And the dog died. And the she buried the dog next to the the diner, and then she burnt the diner down.
Oh,
And the reason I named the town Hope, I didn't I made it up because it was supposed to be this is it's out of Hope. It's not in Hope. This town. I hardly remember this all the stuff. So I tell you, but at any rate, I opened up the paper one day.
yeah.
There's a diner in a town called Hope that burned down. I I I got the chills,
Oh my.
and and this is like this is much after the book came out. Certainly, it wasn't contemporaneous, uh, and it was one of those weird things in life. So, uh, yeah, if life is full of creepy things like that.
I have stuff like that happening to me all the time, and I keep them down. I write them out.
Yeah,
It's a reminder that there's well, that there's something out there that's out there, and it's strange when that stuff happens. But I have that happen all the time. I gotta tell you, it's pretty weird, like you say. So,
weird feeling. When I read it, I could not believe it.
yeah,
I
yeah.
read, and I thought it's some kind of joke somebody was playing. And uh, eh, anyway, uh, yeah, well, it reminds me of something else. Do you remember the, there? There was a talk show on Fox, very popular. By the way, my problem is I have a thing about names. I forget for the last 40 years. Uh, my mother used to call me by my brother's name and my brother by my mother's name. Uh, and I just found out about 4 months ago that my brother's son, who I was chatting with, I'm telling him about this problem I had with names. He says, funny, I have problems with proper nouns. So I was speaking to a neurologist and said that there's something in some part of the brain that was never properly dissected out, but that governs that, and that's where the problem is. But I'm also senile. I forgot what it was. Oh,
It's
so
okay.
it was called Hannity and Combs.
I remember that, huh? Yeah.
And then at one point, uh, Combs died, Alan Combs,
Oh,
and Hannity became very the top star of Fox.
right.
The Alan Combs was a fan of my brother's,
Hmm.
and he had this all night radio show for Fox also. And so after my brother died, I had been on the show several times, but my brother was on the show a lot
Oh,
because he and Alan were friends. And now Alan said to me, I'm going to tell you something you never heard before. And we're in the studio, and I hear my brother as if he's sitting next to me. Um, and what had happened is Alan taped a show, a radio show with my brother, where they were chatting, and the fidelity was so, first of all, so great and so unexpected that I just couldn't even talk. But anyway, Alan asked my brother, he says, does your brother, meaning me, call you Doc? So my brother thinking, and he says, no, he says, what does he call you? He says, I don't know. When he calls me, he just starts talking. And I, I realized that after that, that's what I do. If I know somebody, for whatever reason, the brain doesn't function quickly, and I just start getting, I say, oh, did you speak to so-and-so? So, and so peculiar things, things happen upstairs. I was never very good at music, unfortunately. I have a good ear, but
Mhm.
I can't get past the ear. I, I, I can't sing. I can't play an instrument. My brother used to send me to these places. One well-known guitar player. Uh, I saw a record of his somewhere uh, to teach me. It was hopeless in the guitar. Piano was hopeless, uh, and yet my brother was able to his main instrument was a saxophone,
Oh,
but he could play um, sa- saxophone, clarinet, like most saxophone players could play saxophone, clarinet,
mhm.
and the piano. But when 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 Sheldon said you were an orchestra leader also,
I play guitar. I've been playing
uh,
since I was a little kid.
oh, is it? I mean, well, when I tried it, the fingers were too much of a problem. I couldn't. It was hurting my fingers. But at any rate, my brother had a band. It was called Jerry Felder and his Blue Note Orchestra,
Okay.
and they used to rehearse in my house. Uh, it was about a 7-piece band. Uh, and the funny thing was, years and years and years later, it was a part of it got entwined in my legal career. And what had happened was that I was a prosecutor at that point,
Oh, okay.
and I was in the East U.S. Attorney's office,
Oh,
and I'm trying a case, and we picked a jury, and the man keeps staring at me. I chose him for the jury, you see, and when the case is here, well on the way, it suddenly hits me. That's Morris. Well, Morris was a drummer.
oh,
I'm thinking, oh my God, what do you do now? Thank God the guy was acquitted. So, so, so I didn't have to deal with anything, a mistrial, or was it the guy went away, was free. But um, these things happen. Life is entwined with all kinds of things.
we're all connected. Like you mentioned the guitar player. You said he was a famous guitar player out of New York. Was it Mickey Baker? Was it?
Oh no, I went to you. Mean who was teaching me?
Yeah.
No, I think it was Josh White. I think
Josh White?
I
Really? Oh,
I,
that
th-
is.
I think it was Josh White. Uh, the name just came to me. Uh, this guy was quite a respected guitar player, but sang too. Yeah, blues. I think it was blues. That's what my
Yeah,
brother.
blues. Right, right. Josh White, and he had a partner. I can't think of his name now, but yeah, they used to play in Michigan quite a bit at a place called the Chessmate, which was a famous blues club. And I got to tell you a funny story. I was a little kid and I went there. I was 16 years old, and there was this guy named Howlin' Wolf, this
Oh
big
yeah, I know who that is.
monstrous,
Yes.
yeah, this big monstrous guy. And I didn't know what his real name was. So I go up to him and I said, Mr. Wolf, do you think I could play with your band? And I thought he was going to throw me out of the chessmate. He got so mad that this little white kid could play blues. I just wanted to jam with the guy, but I remember that incident with him, and it was pretty interesting. I play his music on my radio show. You know, some of his.
Howley Wolf. Yeah,
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
it was very distinctive. Very distinctive.
yeah. That voice,
Uh,
that
yeah, yeah,
little
yeah,
gravelly voice. And boy,
yeah.
he scared me. I thought he was going to eat me up. You know.
Well,
So
but
yeah.
wasn't your brother going out into these clubs when he was like a teenager still? And see
Yeah.
Oh, certainly. Uh, uh, and I think that caused the esophageal cancer, throat cancer, that eventually killed him
Mm,
because he cut out smoking 30 years before he died.
yeah.
Those clubs, and the reason I know, I went there, uh, the Pied Piper was on George's with, I remember these clubs, they're all black. He was the only white person in the place. Uh, and under the ceiling, there was a layer of smoke.
Hmm.
Everybody smoked. Uh, and so the specialist who was treating my brother said that the seed was probably sown in that date, and it affected his DNA, and that's how these things happen. Uh, but I know in one of the books about my brother, it may be Lonely Avenue, my brother had an epiphany when he heard uh, Joe Turner singing Piney Brown Blues.
Yes, right, right.
And I learned a lot of blues songs, and the I still have a taste for the music. Uh, in fact, uh, I a client of mine bought a loft very in a what was a junky neighborhood at one point, but at that time was already fancy, very expensive. And there was an antique store in the in on the first floor, and there was an antique jukebox. And I start talking about whatever with the owner, who knew his neighbor now, and I said, I'll bet I'll bet you $100 that I'll tell you the name of the man singing the store. Uh, he said, I'll bet more than that. I said, all right, make it $500, and the winner will give it to charity. Uh, so uh, he thinks I'm being ridiculous. And this man is singing. I said, that's Jimmy Rushing, Mr. 5 by 5. And he looked at the thing. He couldn't believe it. He never looked at the label of the thing. Oh, of course, it keeps spinning. He couldn't see the name. But my brother used to play this stuff, but he would play any kind of music. But so he learned Piney Brown's Blues, uh, uh, going to Kansas City, Kansas, girls and everything is whatever it is. I forget the lyrics.
Yeah.
And he he learned to sing the blues with his song. So he goes to this white one of the Club Georges or one of these places, and they have an open mic. Anybody could sing, and they're making a lot of noise. And he said he wants to come up, and they're looking at him. They see a handicapped white man at his place, and he started singing, and place died completely. So he knew one more song, so he sings the second song, and they wanted him to sing. He didn't know any other song. He just knew the Piney Brown or whatever was the reverse side of Piney Brown. Uh, but at that poem, my brother became a blues singer. Um, so I once said to somebody, he was the only white blues singer. And it was a musician I said it to. He says, what makes you sure your brother was white? It always stuck in my mind. But uh, any rate, he had um, some quasi hits on the black radio stations,
Yes.
and even had a commercial. There was a hit commercial that he made for Ali Pants.
Right.
Uh, it was Ali, you're so good to me. You got these 3-ring bottoms. I don't even know what that meant. 3-ring bottoms and something. Anyway, uh, he so he makes this record as an RCA puts it out. I don't remember the song, and it's doing very well. And then they find out at RCA that my brother's handicapped, that he can't go around uh, go into the circuit or whatever they did at the time. And so they killed the record themselves. They felt there was no future in the record, that they're never going to be able to exploit it. At that point in time, my brother decided there's no future in my being a singer. That's when he went into songwriting.
Oh, okay.
And he he hooked up with a boyfriend of my niece. Um, no, my cousin. That was my cousin. Yeah, and and his name was Mort Schumann,
Right.
and they wrote many hits. Morty went to live in uh, Europe, became very cosmopolitan. Um, the he then translated. He picked up languages easily. He translated Jacques Brel, Jacques Brel, and he wrote Jacques Brel is alive and well. And they ran a long time, Broadway, off Broadway, and the bottom line is he died within the time frame of my brother. Short, not long after my brother, I gave a eulogy for him, and that's how the circle closes. Uh,
I was intrigued in reading this Ken Emerson book about your brother got ideas for songs from reading novels and comic books and everything. Is that?
Anywhere. Well, for instance, one song, uh, I was used to seeing him. What he would do is he'd write on the back of a napkin or an envelope, and I knew it had to do with the songwriting. But when he got married, uh, a lot of music, a lot of musicians around there, and everybody was dancing with my then sister-in-law, uh, and there's even a tape of me dancing with her. And I saw my brother scribbling on a napkin, and that scribbling was "Save the Last Dance" for me. Ultimately,
Is that amazing?
yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
He wrote. Um, uh, Morty wrote most of the music, but my brother wrote the music too to many songs, and I saw them work. Even with the working, there was a very thin line delineating what they what they could do, and somehow we got a piano in my home. I don't know how. And I really remember Morty sitting at the piano, my brother leaning on his crutches, and my brother saying, "No, no, no." And then he would touch one of the keys. He said, "No, no, no." And then we work it. And my brother would put the words that they're writing. And there was one point they were churning out these hits. Uh, uh, I was living in Europe at the time,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize there were hits. And I was taking the ferry from one part of Brooklyn to another part of Brooklyn, across Sheepshead Bay, and I heard I heard some kid with a boombox playing the music, and I was taken aback. And I had not hooked up with my family yet. I was crossing with this ferry, and they said, "Yeah." They said it's on the radio all the time.
Was a major hit, but there was well, Save the Last Dance for me, this magic moment. He
A
wrote,
teenage, a
yeah,
teenager in love. Viva Las Vegas.
yeah, well, Viva Las Vegas. My favorite song of all time is Marie's Her Name of his latest play.
The latest flame.
That is my favorite Elvis song of all time. My band plays that. We play that.
I can't remember having heard that song for some reason, but when I looked at the royalty sheets, I would always see, because it looks strange. It's Perrin. Marie's the name. Perrin, her
Yeah,
latest
right,
name.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even today, when you go to Las Vegas, they're playing it all the time. I think stores, you go into stores, you hear it over the loudspeaker. Um, uh, and the my cousin, his daughter's husband, manages the music rights, but also it's been used in many movies with the occasional songs. And then when you think you're never going to hear the song again, Michael Bublé uh, makes a hit record of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And and then one year It was top of the charts in Tokyo and in Japan. Uh, so the music is an alternative, truly popular American music uh, as part of the American songbook.
Now,
Uh,
yeah, you mentioned earlier, Mr. Felder, that he had some hits on the black radio, and was that the Ray Charles hit "Lonely Avenue" that he wrote for him? Was that the one you
uh,
wrote
uh,
to?
yeah, and he told me something funny about Lonely Avenue, which was a big hit for Ray Charles.
Yeah.
And I did another story I can tell you about Ray Charles, but it was a favorite of junkies.
Oh.
And my brother used to hold court in a place called the Hotel Forest where he lived. So he would be there in the lobby till 5 o'clock in the morning, and people would stop by. All kinds of people would stop by, and a lot of junkies. And my brother sings there's something about the pounding, repetitive rhythm that is in sync with their whatever the devils are in them.
Hmm.
Uh, but when my brother was in the hospital, he lingered. It was a terrible period in everybody's life. But Ray Charles sent him a, a, a tape, a personal tape. He never played the first line to me. He said, it's called a Papa Doc. And it was very private.
Hmm. 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 Well, see, as I was reading the book, it's just amazing what your brother had to overcome because I guess I didn't know this that there was a polio epidemic in the late 20s and 30s. I never knew that. I remember getting a polio shot as a kid, but I never
Yeah.
knew that.
In fact, funny, I was telling my daughter because uh, I got a shot today, the vaccination,
Oh,
and I remember two other epidemics. One was smallpox in I think '47, and it was the same thing, people lining up around the hospitals, and the other was the polio epidemic.
oh,
Uh, the world comes around different ways. I was representing Picasso's son,
oh,
and um, Picasso's mother, Francoise Gillot, was a painter. She's still alive, I believe. She's about 100 years old. She married Dr. Salk,
oh,
the inventor of the polio
sure.
vaccine. So she flew into New York while the trial was going on. I was going to use her as a witness. I think I may have done it actually. Uh, and then I had an idea. He would he would be a great witness. Uh, the Because he was the savior of so many people. Well, I'll talk about the epidemic in a minute. Uh, and then when I saw him, he was very nice to me, but he's a very cold person. I suppose that goes with being a scientist. And I never used him as a witness because I thought he would alienate too many people. He was abrupt and borderline rude, um, uh, very cordial to me, but there was kind of missing warmth in him. Uh, yeah, I, I, uh, I wrote a memoir, very well received, but of course nobody bought. Uh, but I write a detail about the polio epidemic. Uh, if you send me a note, I'll send you a copy of the memoir. But what used to happen is you would open up the newspaper, morning's newspaper, and they say 4 children in Queens struck. Uh, uh, in South Brooklyn, 20 cases reported, always in the summer. And the way my brother contracted polio was, uh, my mother must have saved money to send him out of town to the Catskills to be away in the summer from the polio epidemic. And she also paid for my cousin, who subsequently got polio also, but a much milder case. Uh, and they got it there. It was only fairly recently that uh, they realized that what had happened is the plumbing was not of a good quality in the country, and it seeped into the whatever it is, the water table. I never lived in the country. Whatever it is, seeped into the water supply. So the children in the country built up some kind of resistance to this. It manifested itself with a flu or something, but to polio, the New Yorkers who went there, when they said 40, outbreak of 4,400 children in the camp, that was because the mother sent the kids to the camp thinking that they're out of New York, but they were taken right into the epidemic. And that's where my brother caught it. That's where my cousin caught it, because they both went to the same camp.
Oh, geez.
Wow.
It's amazing.
I remember as a little kid, there was some pools around here, the Crystal Pool. You remember that? And I remember my mom saying, "Do not go in the water." They used to tell us that,
Yeah.
because that's where people would contract it, in the swimming pools. And I remember that. I still got a mark on my arm from it. But he overcame so much, and he became
Yes.
he didn't let it stop him, which is amazing.
No. No. Oh, if you're interested, there's a literary review called the Chicago Quarterly Review. Comes out 4 times a year. Recently, within the last three weeks, something 4 weeks, um, an edition came out, and they published a story of mine in there. It's about actually it's about Roosevelt, but it deals with my brother also, uh, and what had happened. It's a little convoluted story. I had a grandson who had a two-year-old birthday. I write about it there, and his mother, my niece, Doc's daughter, said uh, uh, she found something. And she said, "What do you?" She was going to show it to me. "What do you make of it?" It was among my mother's things. When my mother died, she was very close to my niece, and she gave it to all things. And this is like 25 years after she died. So my daughter finds this thing, and I can't believe what I'm looking at on her phone. It's I'm a history nut, and I have hundreds and hundreds of Time magazines, Life magazines. They're wonderful to read. They're contemporaneous, and they lead you into our time of life. But anyway, uh, so I recognized the signature on this letter. It says Franklin D. Roosevelt, January 16th, uh, uh, 1932. Uh, and at the end of the story, there's a photograph, if you're so inclined, at the Chicago Quarterly Review, there's a photograph of this letter. The letter had brown stains where it was folded, and subsequently, my daughter, who writes books also, just had finished a book, and she knew a house that this publishing house used that was very good in restoring things, and they did a marvelous job restoring things. At that point, Roosevelt was in the governor of New York. 9 months later, he was elected president of the United States, and it's a letter that he sends to my mother, and it says, "I'm sorry to hear about your little boy." Uh, he said, and then he says, "I called the medical director of Warm Springs." I'll tell you about Warm Springs if the name doesn't mean anything to you. And contact him, and my brother uh, then was able to go to Warm Springs. My family couldn't afford it, but through this, uh, the the Warm Springs, Roosevelt had polio, naturally, but um, somebody recommended the therapeutic waters of Warm Springs, Georgia. That's why I called it Warm Springs.
Oh,
And it helped. It was, they said it was good for polio victims, and Roosevelt thought he hit the mother lode was this thing that is going to cure people. He ultimately bought the resort, and ultimately, as I recollect, he died there. He had a cottage there, and he died with his girlfriend. A Russian artist was making a picture of him, and the girlfriend's name was oh God, I forget the name. Uh, it's not a girlfriend. It was a lover. He was a lover of her when he was young, and then he secretly met with her. They had to pull the train over to the sidings and stuff. But um, the again, the world turns around. Uh, I was going the next day. I was going to go to Europe for something, um, and I get a call, and the person at the other end says, "This is Dash Roosevelt. It was one of Roosevelt's sons." It's quite unbelievable. So Lucy Mercer, that was the girlfriend's name, Lucy Mercer, uh, and this man wants to sue the newspaper because they ran banner headlines, "FDR's secret love revealed."
oh, interesting.
So I look it up. You can't libel a dead person. The libel laws don't know, but if somebody's dead, I think they're trying to change it still. But at any rate, uh, so I was leaving the next day, and we ended up meeting this this particular Roosevelt. I won't mention his first name for breakfast at the Biltmore, which was opposite my office at that time. And I'm thinking here, Roosevelt during my lifetime was the most powerful person in the world. The world would have fallen apart without him. England was sinking. To Russia, Hitler was over almost between a third and a half of Russia had been occupied, and America had this enormous uh, potential for producing things. Uh, uh, I just was reading one of my Time magazines the other night that the American fleet that was built during the war was larger than all the fleets of any navy in the world. We put them together, the American fleet. They were able to produce these things, ultimately a ship a day. Uh, the So it's amazing. The circle keeps closing in people's lives if you live long enough.
Yeah.
But anyway, in one of the books that I started reading Roosevelt books, this is this on Saturday, uh, uh, and and in one of the Time magazines, they talk about the president behind his desk, his jacket, his office. They didn't have air conditioning at the White House, and they talk about his massive shoulders. Uh, the My brother had massive shoulders, and we measured his biceps. That's in the article in this Chicago Quarterly. It's a literary magazine. We measured it. It was his bicep was the same as that of Joe Louis,
Wow.
uh, and that's because Roosevelt and he, the crutches, the constantly being on the crutches, and both Roosevelt and my brother were not lightweights. So it means you're walking around with two hands holding up 250 pounds, and that's for a whole day. Um, and they both developed swimming. Uh, uh, Roosevelt built a pool in the White House, and when my brother finally bought a private home, the first thing he did was put in a pool.
Hmm.
The It was he could get in, he could get out. The same thing for Roosevelt, but they were excellent swimmers and they couldn't use their legs, but they had this powerful upper body uh, that propelled them. Uh, and the only thing is that this idea of Roosevelt's, it didn't work. They it's one or two Roosevelt movies. They explain the orthopedist society said it had no. It's like Sister Kenny. I don't know if the name means anything to you. She was a nurse, I think Australian nurse actually. Um, she thought she developed a treatment for polio that involved warm hot towels, and it used to be very painful to put on the people's limbs, and she thought it did well afterwards. I mean, my own thought was that the patient was so relieved to get these hot towels off themselves. They felt better, but it had no therapeutic, real lasting therapeutic value. Um, but he underwent that treatment too. In those days, you, today, 6 months ago, you heard they were writing about something that connects with what Roosevelt was treated with and what my brother was treated with, which is the eye and lung.
Oh,
Today, they called it resuscitators. That they trusted. It's a little different technology. Eye and lung was, it looked like a boiler in an
I
apartment
know.
house
Yeah.
with rivets, and they controlled the atmosphere. Uh, and if you have more atmosphere, heavier, chest collapses, reduce it, and you're breathing, but you're in the eye and lung. The resuscitator actually is the same damn thing, except they realized that they could do this externally. They could shove this tube down. It's horrible from what I read. They for the people who had the virus,
Yeah.
they shoved a tube down their throat, and then they had an electronic gadget that would force air down and suck air up, and it was the same thing. So nothing much changes with time. So both very primitive ways of dealing with the thing. The eye and lung was up. I'm going to send you, if you send me an email, I'm going to send you a copy of my book. I think I can find it. I go into great detail explaining how it worked, but it was barbaric because you take these little kids, they put this in this gadget. They're not allowed to see their mother. The only way they could see is by a mirror that was mounted at the top. And but their parents are allowed to look down on them because they go through some sort of window. And it was just a horror treatment. It was no treatment at all. Uh, at one time, they spoke about amputating my brother's legs. He wouldn't let them do that. It was some lunatic orthopedist thought that they'd be better off if they give them wooden legs or whatever. My brother actually got to drive an automobile. After the war, there were so many paraplegic veterans without legs, that Bendix Air Company, again, this is my idiocy, I don't know how I remember this. Bendix Air Company made air brakes for trucks. So they mounted it around, just under the steering wheel. And if you wanted to stop, you press down or and that stops. The only problem was, because my brother took me for many rides, God knows how he passed the driving test, but he took me for many rides. This Bendix air brake, that's what it's called, was so powerful that if you're driving 5 miles an hour and you want to stop the car, it would stop with this thing, and you'd have to grab the windshield, to prevent flying into the windshield. And if you think you wouldn't fly at the windshield at 5 miles an hour, don't bet on it. If it's a stop is that sudden. So I say even that comes around. That they made hydraulic cars with well, that was it after the war. They never were able to figure out how to do sufficiently a hand thing for the on the left side for the pedal, gas pedal, and the right was the Bendix brake. So between the two of them, you could. The only problem is that you had to run the steering wheel too, so it didn't work. It didn't work exactly well, and he wrecked a couple of cars. Um, he was in at least 2 or 3 automobile accidents. Yeah.
Oh, did you, you know, what I'm curious about is some of the recording sessions that you were in that you watched. Did you ever see any, like you watched like the Drifters perform and it became a hit, or tell us something about that you
Yeah, I've been to many recording sessions. Um, yeah, I don't. That name. Those years, the name didn't matter to me. Sometimes we're a group,
uh-huh.
sometimes it's an individual singer, and it was always at a place called NOLA Studios, NOLA,
Okay.
and it was there were studios that artists, recognized artists, and the record companies didn't have their own facilities. They used NOLA Studios or a competitor of NOLA's.
Uh-huh.
Because it required an enormous investment for equipment. And anyway, um, so it was to me. Oh, and then sometimes going from one studio to another, you would see well-known musicians. Uh, and I remember when I was one of the first times I went, uh, that Milton Berle had a television show. Everybody used to watch it on Sunday nights, and the trumpet player was in the act, sort of like they do in the Tonight Show. So,
Yeah.
and I actually saw this guy walking around the place with his trumpet, and I remember saying, "Oh my God, look at that!" But at any rate, um, this is suddenly, to me, it was like some kind of epiphany. You you go there and you suddenly hear all this music here. And it's music. It's not out of a little box. Uh, uh, and it went out of my mind. But there is a Netflix, I think it's on Netflix, and I would recommend it to anybody, even if you don't like Frank Sinatra. But Frank Sinatra did a session with Quincy Jones, and they were all well-known jazz musicians. So one of the names is so I think older men recorded with my brother on the session too. Um, and Sinatra made it as they used to make records, which was um, the orchestra would sit around you. There's none of that business overdubbing, all this business. The sound of music is coming out of this box, and somebody else is there, and you mail it in or whatever they
Right.
do. But Sinatra's recording this thing, and it was a throwback, but it's a remarkable thing to see because it's organic. You see how it grows, and Sinatra, when you watch this, was not a dope. He was he could not read music, but yet, because I read that somewhere, but yet he was able to point out to them, what he wanted on the charts, and he was basically reading the words. But it's one time there was a a, um, a friend of my brother's was a musician. I don't remember who, but I I is Leonard Bernstein wrote a song called "Lonely Town." And it's a very difficult, you're a musician, so you know, it's a very difficult piece. Uh, it's an interesting piece, but it's difficult. And so I said to this musician, I said, I hadn't seen the video yet, but I had heard Sinatra's record of a Lonely Town. And I said, this is remarkable. How could this man who can't read music see all these changes in all this business? And the musician simply said to me, well, that's what they do. Meaning, if you're a musician, that's what you do. I'm sorry about the noise. It's
That's okay.
yeah, I can't control it.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
a
we
lot of
hear the
things,
changes. You're right about that. We hear the changes in the music. We hear it. In fact, I'll tell you something funny.
yes,
Hearing some of the songs that your brother wrote, I hear the chords by just listening to it. C, A minor, F and G, or
yeah,
G, D minor, C and D, or F, F, D minor, B flat, C. It's the same pattern. You hear that, and
yes.
after a while, you just know what it is. And these guys, a lot of them just don't read; they hear. They're ear players. And they,
Yeah,
wow,
that's a significant comment because I've seen that. my brother was self-taught music, um, but yet he was able to. When I used to watch him writing with Morty, he would say it's diminished this, that,
Yeah.
this, and it's remarkable. It's inborn. It's a talent. Do you know today? Maybe you do know this. Uh, these stock houses like J.P. Morgan and these well-known,
Yeah.
they hire people who are musically trained. They're intelligent too, and they pay them enormous salaries because there's something in your brain that if you understand music, it's beyond me, but it somehow uh, has the same kind of thinking process that you need for music. And one of these guys who was my client was explaining to me, and I could not follow him at all. It just didn't seem to make sense. But there's that, and some people actually have perfect pitch. The singers for the commercials and stuff. A lot of them have perfect pitch. They pick up anything. Uh, there was a there was a young woman. She's not so young now. I know her name was. I know her name was. It'll come to me in a second. She sounds just like Barbara Streisand. Only she's better. She has perfect pitch. But Rosalind, Rosalind. She performed. What's the name?
You said
I,
Rosalind Kind? Is that what
I'm
you
not
said?
sure if that's it.
Oh,
no, that's not it. That's not it. But she sounded like she wasn't imitating Barbara Streisand. She just, unfortunately for her, sounded like Barbara Streisand. But she did have perfect pitch, and she opened for Sinatra a lot in Las Vegas.
oh.
And she told me once she she learned a lot from him. So I once asked her, "What did you learn from him?" She said, "Well, for instance, I learned that you could follow the spotlight because the heat it makes on top of your head." And I got to tell you, I used to do not MCs, but I used to do like the Israeli pops. I introduced them,
Yeah.
and you'd have to walk around. I found it only takes about 10 minutes to realize that. You feel like you just concentrate on it, but you could feel when the spotlight's hitting the top of your head. Um, and but she had perfect pitch, and yet her career. Well, I can't remember her name. You can't remember her name.
Yeah.
Uh, Julie Budd. Julie Budd.
I've heard of her. Okay.
Julie Budd, and you will see she had perfect pitch. Um, there is one young Irish woman. I found her by accident. She died at a very young age. Uh, of course, I don't remember her name, but uh, she made several records. It's the same thing. You could tell she has perfect pitch. Uh, uh, Now for instance, I had a lady coming for me. She's a singer, professionally. It's not professionally to see. She was here to see me professionally about a problem. So she didn't seem too bright, and her speaking voice wasn't that pleasant. So I asked her. I said, "Did you do you have trouble with pitch?" She said, "No, not at all." I said, "But it's very difficult if you." She said, "No, we got a box here, and they adjust. Apparently, they could adjust it uh, afterwards."
Yes.
And, and I'm thinking, all you got to do is show up then. The, but she said that's all adjusted in the studio electronically.
Yes,
Uh,
you do that. Yeah. It's called auto tune. You
he
draw
knows
the pitch,
more.
and it brings you on. And
He
what I
knows
do,
more than I do. See,
yeah, auto tune. As a guitar player, I have a program called Transcribe. And so what'll happen is I'll put some music on and I'll try to figure it out, but it's not in the same pitch as my guitar. So what I'll do is I'll find the pitch and I'll lower it so it corresponds with my guitar. And you could do that now with what they have. It's a great way to learn music. That's how I learned some of the jazz stuff that I play and some of the other rock and roll stuff that I learned. But that's what they have now. The technology is incredible, and you're right. They could correct it. They could take spots out digitally, put it here, correct it, and put it right back in. It's just amazing.
That's what I say. You just have to look good and show up. That's all you have to do.
Like you say, just show right up. So, of all the people that your brother was friends with, who did you like the most? Who did you admire the most? Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
he was friendly with a lot of unsavory people too.
yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
he, um, I got along with all of them because the um, I like to listen to live music even today.
Yeah.
There's no substitute for that. And I remember we had a number of piano players. One was a guy, Reggie Ashby. His fingers was blunt, and I remember this guy could make such beautiful music, just banging these blunt fingers of his, hitting. We had a piano. I don't know how the hell we ever afforded it, but we had a piano. Um, I learned in life, whatever you want most, you can afford. Basically, if a stenographer wants a mink coat badly enough, she'll have a mink coat at some point. Um, but you know, I'm trying to think that nobody ever asked me that question. He
Oh,
knew everybody. He knew everybody. He knew everybody. He used to correspond and during the middle of the night talk to them. There was a guy who was a very well-known writer. I think he recently passed.
hmm.
He dedicated the book, the next book to Doc Palmas. Uh,
Oh,
When I was at my brother's funeral, I looked around and it was packed, and they had a loudspeaker going into the street, um, so people could stand outside and hear because there was music at his funeral.
yeah.
Uh, and right behind me, I looked at the guy, and first I don't recognize me, Chris Christopherson, who at that time was a big star, legitimate. He was in a movie, I think, with some other female star.
It was Barbara Streisand, wasn't he?
Yeah, Barbara Streisand. That's right. Yeah, but apparently he was also a musician,
Yeah.
and he was a friend who showed up at the funeral, and. Uh, he had a coterie of everybody from dormant to strange people. Uh, just standing with him, it was like an education, and as things happen. For instance, I'm still laughing to myself. The Duke Ellington had there was a Broadway press agent, Joe Morgan. It was he's famous. He was Duke Ellington's press agent, among other things. And I was standing with my brother, and Joe Morgan was there. He wasn't the most perceptive person in the world. And um, a one of my brother's friends. Oh, I was left something else. Duke Ellington's was on the road. Duke Ellington was a client of mine too. Was on the road, and they looted his client, his van or whatever it was, of this costume he was going to wear for the Ed Sullivan show that he was going to be on that evening. Ed Sullivan, a huge show done on Sunday nights, and he ultimately was on the show. He didn't have um, the costume, but he put something together very quick, so he performed in the show. So this guy walks in, all dressed up, uh, ostrich shoes and the works. And Joe Morgan is standing next to my brother. And Joe Morgan is talking to my brother, telling him about what happened. And this guy comes over there talking. And Joe Morgan says, it's funny you're wearing that. Duke has the same shoes. Somebody took it. And then it goes all through the wardrobe. He said, you gotta, Duke has a red jacket. You must go to the same place. And my brother's looking at me, don't say anything. He's motioning to me, don't say anything. Because it was obvious. This is the guy who broke into the car. He was some junkie that my brother knew. And the other people who were sitting in there all understood it. They're holding their they're looking the wrong way, so he shouldn't see it, and that they're laughing. Um, but all these other things. Well, I was just going to tell you another story, but this guy's still alive and performing. Um, uh, he, a very good-looking girl walks into the forest, uh, and my brother speaks. He says, "How's he?" He says, "I'm tired. I've been on the road with Miss So and So. Miss So and So was a well-known male performer, but it turned out that I didn't know this. My brother knew it. She called him Miss So and So because he was gay, but the Bobby Sox or whatever they are was swooning over him, and the, another person who was like a confidant, a very close friend of my brother's, was um, 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 the son of Damon Runyon.
Oh.
His name was Damon Runyon Jr.
Mhm.
He ultimately committed suicide.
Mhm.
As a lawyer, you would appreciate this. What happened is that Damon was a reformed drinker,
Mhm.
and he couldn't even have a cream pie that was made with liquor or anything like that. But we used to go, and he was a very good photographer. He he um, he made a wonderful picture of my photograph. He used a photograph in black and white, and he could not sleep. So he did it all night. My brother, I had it on the wall. I think I gave it to my nephew. No, I gave it to my son. I think wanted it. But at any rate, um, what he did is the royalties used to come in from his father's books. His father had written several movies, Lady for a Day, and many things. I forget, Little Miss something with Shirley Temple. But anyway, and he had this hit column like Walter Winchell. He used to be around Broadway. They took out his esophagus, so Winchell used to take him uh, around, and he had a book says Damon Says, SEZ, and Damon would write it out. I mean, Damon's father would write it out. Uh, in fact, when he died, Walter Winchell started an organization called the Damon Runyon Cancer Fund. That was a very fine organization because they didn't bury it in an administrative costs or anything. Nobody got money except the people who needed the money. Uh, But anyway, all of this happened at a hotel called the Hotel Forest, which is now called the Hotel Consulate. The reason the name changed was this. Madison Square Garden was down the street, we called it the old Madison Square Garden, and the circus used to come there. And uh, the what happened? The clown, the leading clown, well known as a clown, stayed at the forest because it was down the block, and it was found murdered there.
Mhm.
And it turned out a prostitute, uh, we were having some disagreement with a prostitute, and the prostitute took a fire extinguisher off the wall, hit him over the head. He fell down the steps and he was killed. Murder. So it took the bloom off the rose. They had to change the name of the hotel. That's why it was called the Consulate. That's why it's called the Consulate now. But it was, and my brother used to hold court there, but he also held court with in several well-known rock places, and he had close friends, very odd. On one end, he had his gambling days. He ran poker games or card games. I don't know if it's poker. And till the police broke it up, and they were held up and all this sort of stuff. Uh, and my brother was apparently, as it appeared in print, I may have known, I may have forgotten, was there was a very famous actress called Veronica Lake,
Oh.
was drop dead gorgeous, and the story that appeared, I was telling that to my daughter, who follows music. He actually was it was A&R for Sony Music at one point in time. Uh, and she's sitting next to me in the car, and I tell her, she said, "What are you talking about?" She said, where did you hear such a ridiculous thing? And I see her like all young people then and now do. As soon as there's something they want to look up, they pull out the phone and they start plug the internet. And I see her saying next to me, "Oh my God, she found it on the internet about him and Veronica Lake." Uh, Probably still is on the internet, but the Veronica Lake was very beautiful, a stunning woman. She wore a hairdo with like peekaboos over her eye, and the government uh, made her stop it because they didn't make her, but they explained to them the problem was that women were copying this hairdo and they were working in defense plants. The hair was getting caught in the machinery, and tragedies could happen. So she changed her hairdo immediately, and so the later movie she didn't have this hairdo, but she made movies with that time Alan Ladd, a lot of them, because he was actually very short too. She was very short, petite. Um, and he, in fact, he wore high heel, not high heel shoes, but we used to call them Adler elevators. They used to have it. They add an half inch to your height. Adler elevated shoes. Um, by optical illusion, they had to build up the inside and then they put the leather outside, so it looked like you were half inches tall. But so there was a cast of really a revolving cast of hundreds. Um, and what he would do if he would see something that he wanted to say something to about somebody, he could reach anybody. He would write them a note or pick up the phone. Not I saw Bob Dylan going into his apartment one time. Um, he got me out of the apartment. He said, "Somebody's coming. I don't think you should be here." Uh, and then I realized I saw Bob Dylan going in the elevator as I was coming out of the other elevator. So I realized he was going up to see my brother. Um, and then they actually wrote a couple of songs, I believe. Uh, uh, at the eulogy, there was another speaker, a record producer, who said the, the songs they wrote together were the worst songs my brother had ever written. And he said the reason was he was writing a Bob Dylan song and not a Doc Palmer song, and there were a lot of musicians in the audience when he told us when he said this, and the musicians were nodding their head yes, because I was sitting on the desk, so I looked down, I saw them, they were all nodding their head yes. You can't you stick to whatever you do well. You don't become a writer for somebody else.
Now, didn't he start branching out, working with others? Like there was a guy, I saw the movie, the documentary, and there was a guy named Mink DeVille that
Yeah,
he was friends with.
Mink DeVille was. Uh, I met him a number of times at my brother's place.
Mhm.
Uh, he he was apparently quite talented.
Yeah.
He was a white guy, not black. Uh, a very thin fellow. He looked like he could be consumptive or something. And he worked with Mick DeVille. Mick DeVille did a whole album of my brother's songs. He also wrote with Dr. John.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
um, and Dr. John spoke at my brother's funeral too. The and he's an odd-looking fellow, Dr. John. Just recently died, I think.
Yes.
He had feathers. He was from New Orleans. It was this whatever voodoo. And Dr. John spoke at the funeral, and he said, well, "My brother." Apparently, there was no secret. It was 2,000 people there. So he said that he was addicted to drugs,
Oh,
and so he tells the story. He said And he said, Doc said to me, they said, why do you blow out your goddamn, just go in the bathroom, blow out your goddamn brains because you're just going to die longer like this. Or something like this. And I know that there's a rabbi sitting there. And so they're using not polite language when he's telling, explain what my brother said, but he said back to my brother. And I'm thinking the rabbi, is looking at this. He's at a funeral. Boy, he never heard anything like this. But Dr. John actually played music and sang at the funeral. Um, he wrote when he was in the hospital. He won an Emmy called "There's Got to Be a Place. There's got to be a better place somewhere" for B.B. King.
Oh, yes.
And it won an. Is it an Emmy you get for the albums? Yeah, an Emmy. And I was told that in the middle of it, he broke down and started crying. Now, CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, has an annual dinner, or they had at that time, and B.B. King was the guest. And a lot of these things, they have the guests, there's like a green room or whatever they call it. The guests have a glass of wine or there's a liquor, and they congregate, and then they go out and sit in the desk. So I see B.B. King there, and I tell him the story that I heard, and he said, yeah, and then he starts telling me it, and he broke down crying. And
Yeah. I met B.B. King. There was a place called the Grandy Ballroom. And
yeah,
B.B. King was an influence on my guitar playing when I first started. And I met him, and he was one of the most humble people I had ever met.
very sweet man. My brother told me that he was a great guitar player too. He
Oh,
said Phil Spector was a great guitar player. Amongst the strangest things, at Roseland, which was a big dance hall in New York,
yeah.
uh, the my brother called me and said, "Well, you want to come? You want to be a judge in a rock and roll piano, a Jerry Lee Lewis concert."
Oh,
Uh, so I go there. The two judges. I don't think there was a third. Were myself and my brother. And these people are competitive. It's a very, how he plays. He plays standing up and banging, playing with
right.
the elbows and all this. And they were all good. And my brother says, "You're all terrific. It's hard to pick a winner. You all won all this." But then he told me who was, when I couldn't tell one from the other. The other thing he always did was, if somebody was performing, I've been to a number of places with him, he would stop talking and he stopped people talking after talking. And I once said that this guy wasn't great, He said, no, but he's doing the best he can. Stop.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. The thing that I took from the book is that you can succeed even if you have things like handicaps or whatever, and you just do it. And what was amazing is that here's the question that I was curious about. Here he's a blues singer, okay, and then he decides to write songs. What was his first break? Wasn't it with the Drifters, and he started writing with them, and then
No,
this?
I think the first thing that you could call a hit that was played on the black radio stations was this commercial for Alley Clothes.
Oh, is that?
Alley, because that was played all the time. I suppose it cost a nickel in those days to put it on the air for the advertisement. But that was the first one where then he made a number of records. For a company called Blue Note, he made records. You could still today, the albums made of his singing, and there's a Swedish album of his singing. Uh, Corina. What I'm trying to say some of the
Sure. There was I'm trying to think of the name of the tune that he did. Oh God, what was it here? I want to ask you about Hill and Range in the Brill Building.
Yeah,
But,
I used to go there all the time. I
and, yeah,
they they gave him an office there. Him and Morty had an office there. That was a very unusual building. Um, if you walked in the hallways, you saw it would say Bing Crosby music, or Frank Sinatra music, or Elvis Presley music. What they did is, if artist would perform a song, they'd insist they want writer credit. Um, and so it looked like they were, and so they had a publishing company. The In fact, there was a famous one. I'm a fool to want you. That if you look at it, it says Sinatra and Schwartz and whatever the other people's two other names. Uh, Sinatra recorded that album, that song in an album, and these guys were in the studio, and they went up to him and said, "You know, this is the greatest thing we ever heard. We want to make you uh, a, list you as the writer." Now, I thought that was kind of ugly thing to do because that meant that Sinatra was getting royalties for getting royalties as a singer, but he was also getting royalties like this. But then I tell you, I heard years later, I listened again to the song, and I realized that a song, a work of music, is not complete until it's performed. And one part of that is in the hands of the performer. You get the most wonderful song, and it becomes garbage. Um,
now,
and
did you know the Orbrat brothers from Hill and Range? Did you know any of the famous?
I know Helen Range intimately. I don't know. Paul Case was another guy. My
Oh,
brother
yeah,
close.
that name was mentioned. Yes.
Yeah, um, they were very successful. They were Auerbach brothers.
Yes.
The brothers are dead. The wife may still be around. I
Hmm.
went to a charity affair in right here. She had a big apartment at Fifth Avenue, but she may have died too. But so they published all these songs. They were the world's biggest collector of an artist who was very popular at the time, Bernard Buffet. And with a B, not with Buffet, but B,
Yeah.
Bernard Buffet, and you would recognize in a minute. The only trouble was that Bernard Buffet created all the pages were the same, like Stephen Foster, they were all the same song. But this guy, every painter looked the same. These bold black the outlines and all this business. But anyway, they were worth a lot of money, so they collected and they were all around the studio. And they gave my brother a small room, and he with a piano. These kind of rooms had pianos, and the music was created there. Uh, and sometimes, my brother Morty would write something, and Morty would go sometimes because Morty would quasi perform it. It's interesting when my brother stopped singing, he never sang uh, after that. Yeah, no, he had his voice. He sounded like Perry Como, something like that, but with a better range and less brown in the voice. It was, um, and he used to sing to my mother, "I'll take you home again, Kathleen," and she was transfixed. It was and then sometimes he would sing. I asked him to sing Danny Boy, and he sang it, and he sang perfectly, uh, uh, without any sheet music or without having the lyrics there. You know. Uh, and where did this come from? Nobody knew. This was every time the family used to get together and say, "Well, where did they get this from?" It happens. I represented Picasso's son,
Yeah.
a lovely human being, but no talent.
Good thing.
Good. Well,
He became a photographer, passable photographer, but you'd think something had to pass over to children, and it never did. Uh, uh,
I want to play something for you. Can I play
yeah,
something for you right now?
yes.
Okay, I want to play you this here. Let me find it here on my computer here. And I'm going to play this on the show tonight here. This song, let's see here, it should come up in a second.
That's my brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they call me doc, I can make you feel so good. Is that enough for you, sir?
The one subside to side.
Yeah. And then this was amazing. I played this one here. Let me find this here. Let's see here. Fabian. He wrote for Fabian. I said,
Fabulous Fabian. Fabian had no voice.
no voice.
Had no voice, didn't understand music, but he looked beautiful.
Yeah, he looked like Elvis when Elvis went in the army. He took over. But then there was this one here. Now,
He was in Philadelphia, Fabulous Fabian.
so there is a song. The reason I brought up Mink DeVille because I was listening to his song. It's called "When You Walk My Way," which he wrote. But you could hear the '50s music in here, and I'll play it for you. So this is like an '80s sound, but listen to what he does with what Doc comes up with.
When you walk my way,
But there's '50s.
don't you pass me by. It's a Doc Poker song. It will be so heavenly, heavenly if you walk with me.
And here we go, right here. See? There's your '50s sound right there.
Yeah.
See, that's Doc Thomas's stamp right there. So I heard that, when I read the book, I didn't know that he wrote with him. But when I heard the song, I said, look at all the influence. There is your '50s and '60s rock and roll influence that he gave to the world.
What about the Latin beat to Save the Last Dance for Me?
Yeah, let me play that for you. Let me find it here. Let's see here.
He used to like Latin music. Across the street, there was the Puerto Ricans, but they like Spanish music. They sit on the steps, and my brother would love it.
Well, I like it too. I remember as a kid, I remember hearing the song Diana by Paul Anka, and they had that calypso kind of guitar sound in there, which really influenced me on guitar. But here's Save the Last Dance for Me, right there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Every dance with the guy with you I let him hold you tight.
That's Benny King singing.
You can smile. If you smile for the man who held your hand, people tell no lie. But don't forget who's taking you home, and in his arms you're gonna be. So darling, say the last dance for me. Oh, I know that the music's fine, like sparkling wine. Go and have your fun. Oh, I know, laugh and sing. Yes, I know. But while we roll off, don't give your heart to anyone. But don't forget who's taking you home, and in his arms you're gonna be. So darling, say the last dance for me.
And that was from when he saw his wife dancing at
at the wedding.
Wasn't it at the delicatessen? You had wasn't it?
No. That was from the wedding. The delicatessen was
the wedding. Yeah.
Wedding. By the way, I was in a shared camp with my daughter today, and she says, "Listen, there's a guy selling like frankfurters and stuff, one of these wagons, and I didn't hear it, but she just listened to play Save the Last Dance for Me. There was a sequel to Save the Last Dance for Me.
Oh.
It's a female group singing, Yes, I'll Save the Last Dance for Me.
Oh, really? Oh, I gotta find that for tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
During this time, Mr. Felder, did you ever have a feeling or an idea to submit to your brother for a song? Did you ever
Good
feel that
question.
way?
Were you able to, did you ever have an idea to submit to your brother a song? Here's an idea. Why don't you try this?
No. In fact, I offered to write with him. I had some little talent in that area, but he turned me down because there was a fallow period where he had nobody. And I didn't quite realize that the writing was no chore for him at all. It's when he had it married to somebody's musicals, we were working with him musically. No, do you know that? In the Jewish tradition, when you visit a grave, there you leave a stone,
Right.
and I think even in Muslim culture, you do the same thing. And frequently, I go there and I find the stones there, and I thought it's a relative, but then when I over the years asked each relative, they say they noticed it too. It wasn't. It's somebody who's a fan. This is leaving the stones, or maybe a group of people. And around this tombstone, there's some lyrics from, I think, the B.B. King album, the last album. Yeah.
Fascinating. Wow. There was I'm trying to, let me see what else I have here that I thought was pretty interesting. When they did Fabian, he did Turn Me Loose. I remember
Yeah.
I remember that, and then but he did Little Sister. He wrote that for Elvis.
Yeah.
And but then he wrote Laverne Baker did an answer song, but he wrote that also. It was called Hey Memphis. He wrote it also.
I didn't know that. I never heard that.
He wrote. I found that out by just doing some research, and it was an answer song to Little Sister, and he wrote that also, which I thought was pretty cool. And let's see, This Magic Moment, the beginning of that was just incredible.
Well, that swirling violins.
Oh God, that's just unbelievable.
That was his idea too. Somebody else told me that. He wrote the song, and then when they're making the record, Presley used to call him. He never met Presley, because Presley had this colonel, his manager, was afraid of, I gather, people meeting him to take him away from. Anyway, but he called him frequently from the studio when they were recording. But somebody else told me this, that they were recording, and then he had the idea of this swirling violins. And somebody else said it's the best 3 minutes of any song of the era that's ever been written.
Let's see if I could find that here. Let's see here. Here it is, right here.
This magic moment, so different.
That's incredible. That's just incredible.
Well, when you think about, first of all, you're more of an authority than I am. The only stringed instrument you think of when you think of rock music is a guitar. They had multiple violins
Now,
and it worked. Yeah.
Now, my favorite song, this is the song that I get the chills when I hear this one. Let me find it for you here. It's okay. This one right here. I Count the Tears.
I Count the Tears. Yeah, that was a hit too. Yeah.
Counted every day since you've been away. It seems like 1,000 years.
right here.
She's gone and found somebody new. He may be happy now, but soon
Wow.
he'll be counting every day that you've been away. It'll seem like 1,000 years. And then na 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 na
Wow. That is a work of art right there. To come up with something like that. I'm just a guitar player. Once in a while, I'll come up with a cool guitar lick when I'm playing, but to come up with something that the world has, it's just incredible. But I have something else I want to play for you here. I have actually the demo version of when they came up with Teenager in Love.
Yes.
And that's pretty
Wow.
It's great to be young and in love.
Love.
Yeah. Well, do you have any information on that you could fill us in?
No, I'm trying to think. No, I remember that it was number one for a long time.
But they were actually, you could hear them coming up with the song as they're demoing it, like right here. Oh, that's Mort Schumann, I think. Right there. That's up above. Why don't you? Right there. I feel so happy that it seems like the just a dirty shame and little girl. You know that you're the one to blame. Each night I find the stars up above. It's great to be young and in love. Let's name the day soon, sometime in the middle of June, when we'll walk side by side. You'll be blushing like high. Let's shout it from the rooftop. Let's shout it to the streets below. Let's tell our friends and foes. I want the whole wide world to know that the stars up above. It's great to be young and in love. It's great to be young and in love. Now this is a live version of Dion and the Belmonts.
Oh, yeah.
Teenager in love. So I got to tell you what I did with that, Mr. Felder. We were talking earlier about the sounds and how you could transcribe with the keys. It was a different key when I heard it from the live version, but I wanted to mix them and put them together. So I actually had to raise the pitch on the actual version of Dion to mix it with the live version so that it would sound coherent, So I did that. I'll tell you what, I'd rather do this than practice law. I'd rather do the music than anything else. This is.
Well, you're lucky you have the skills. You can do it. I would love to do it too, but I can't do it.
But you lived through it. You lived through the.
I lived through it, yes.
You lived through that. You're like a historian. You're actually a rock and roll historian. You lived through it. You saw it. You saw how it got big and how it morphed into everything. But it's the history of. That's what we do with our show, and that's why Myron and I wanted you on. How we came up with the idea is that we started talking. I've been getting together with Myron for lunch every Saturday for years, and we like old rock and roll. He's a playwright also, and very creative. He writes for local shows here. So we were talking one day about the Brill Building, and as we were talking about it, he had a book by this guy Ken Emerson, and we were talking about Doc Thomas and Mort Schumann. So I thought that was his real name. And then we started doing research, Myron and I, and we saw that his name was Jerome Felder, and then your name came up. And I said, oh my God, let's talk to the brother. He knows. He knows everything. Plus being famous yourself, I thought, wow, 2 in 1. We got a double play today with you on.
Do you have any sense of how he came up, why he came up with the name Doc?
Yeah, how did he get Doc?
No, I think I know why he changed the name.
Okay.
I don't know how he got that. I heard him. He makes up if you'd ask him, he'd make up a different story time. But I think he changed the name because in the neighborhood we lived in, you didn't want to have a white blues singer who goes to black nightclubs.
Oh.
The neighbors would not be happy with that. They were not happy with that.
I remember reading in the book. I don't know if you remember this, that when he needed to get a cab to go somewhere.
Oh yeah.
You had to walk out of the neighborhood to hail a cab because cabs were afraid to come in. The neighborhood was too tough.
Also, they didn't want to take handicapped people. It was a different world. Yeah, that too. They didn't want to come in the neighborhood because the neighborhood was a kind of tough neighborhood, afraid of their own health safety. But also, there was a different psyche in the world. They didn't have cabs that are amenable. So what I used to have to do is, first of all, to get them in the neighborhood, to come in the neighborhood, I'd have to walk to Broadway, Brooklyn, which was sort of okay street. There's an L on it. I get in the cab, and I would say, once I was in the cab, I say, go straight. Oh, I just remembered, make a left. We got to pick up somebody at Manhattan and McKibben. Otherwise, you couldn't get the cab. It was a cruel time too, but there must be 1,000 stories like this buried in people's minds. But it was a different time. I don't know if better or worse, but it was different. Yeah.
I saw you dancing at the wedding.
Yeah, well, that's it, right. But he was riding away when I was dancing at the wedding.
Yeah.
He was dribbling on the back of a napkin.
So that's what it was. Okay. Wow. Okay.
Well, I'm not sure it's a valid memory, but I did see him so many times when we were out in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
He did a lot of back of envelope stuff too. But when we were out, it usually was a napkin. It's the only thing with the stubby wooden pencil. Yeah.
So I read in the book also, The Lonely Avenue, how you got into family law, matrimonial law. You said you were a U.S. attorney, and then Morty Schulman. Was a divorce. Is that how you got into it?
Yes, because I was able to prove the best man at the wedding had an affair with the bride.
Oh,
In those days, it used to be on the front page of newspapers. So there were headlines: New York Daily News, best man kisses and tells.
okay.
And and I produced him in court, and you know,
So
he
that
was,
launched your career.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, that's okay. Now, you wrote a book on matrimonial clauses for lawyers. That's pretty interesting. I just saw that today. And
That's I just stopped it because it consumes you after a while. I
yeah.
did I did 58 updates, if you can believe that, of the book.
I do a lot of music law. The family law cases are just, they take so much out of you. It's just, I give you a lot of credit for doing that.
But you got to be a musician for if you're going to practice music. You got to be really a musician yourself.
yeah, So when you wrote the book with Jackie Mason, how did that come about?
Oh well, I knew him at the time. He was he, he's one of the few comedians who are the same off stage as on stage. But again, where the writing and the law they connect, bisect with each other. One of the books was Schmucks,
Yeah.
and we got fed up with the book before the end of the book, both Jack and I. But it wasn't quite enough to make a book up, and so somebody else finished it. I have no idea who, but the publisher got somebody.
Oh, okay.
And in there, they told this joke, which I never really even read because I was only interested in my thing. And at this point in time, I was chairman of the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, which all states have. You have a complaint about a judge does some crazy. And so they were trying to show they were holier than thou. And there was a joke in there that neither Jackie wrote nor I wrote. It said, I want to. The joke was this: I was going to go to Puerto Rico to visit my hubcaps.
Oh, Jesus.
It's an old joke. So they were very holier than thou. And the mayor at the time, who I'm friendly with today, I'm sorry, he was governor.
Oh,
He said he's going to get me removed as chairman of the state commission, which I would have been happy with. Yeah, I don't get paid for that. A state commission, and I wasn't even thinking, but I said, there was like a minor scandal called Troopergate at that point, minor. So I said, I'll be chairman longer than he'll be governor. Well, the bottom line was, I was chairman 13 days longer. I stayed to the end of my term than he was governor. He, I don't know if you recall this. They called the newspapers called him the Love Gov, and he was caught with prostitutes. And he traveled to Washington, and he resigned. He had to resign, and I stayed till the end of my term.
oh, you beat him. Interesting. So with Jackie Mason, my dad and my dad's 98 years old, and so
Yeah.
oh, it's a blessing. So I'll go over there. We'll watch Jackie Mason bit shtick from the Ed Sullivan Show and all the shows, and he to this day, to me, he's the funniest guy I've ever seen. The genius, how he comes up with his comedy is just
a whole construct. And
yeah.
I'll tell you, I never told anybody this, but when the iPad came out, I thought I surprised Jack because I saw that you could get some of the Ed Sullivan shows on iPad, but nobody had iPads. So Jack and I were having dinner that night at a coffee shop, and I said, Jackie, listen to this, and it's him on the Ed Sullivan Show. He started, backing up. He said, and I explained to him what it is, and now his wife Jill, Jackie's still listening to this thing. And his wife Jill says, "Put it away already. We're having dinner." And I was closer to Jackie at that point, and I hear him looking at the thing, saying to himself in very sincere terms, I mean, in awe of that this could be done this way. He said, I was really that good, he said. I was really that good. He, uh, but he wasn't saying this in any braggadocio or anything like that. He was just saying it in a kind of amazement, having never heard this for like some of these routines, the other me, or some, there was a number of routines he had that he wrote every one of them. And of course, his ability to tell a story is very unique. But he was just amazed at it. And I think that's a tribute in of itself, that somebody could be amazed at the way they, because most of the people will say, if you hear anything, they'll say, I sounded like such a jerk then. I could do things smart, but he was really, really amazed. And it was brilliant stuff. As you say, it was really brilliant stuff. And he really didn't tell jokes. These were not jokes.
They were, it seems like a lot of logic was involved from
Yeah.
one premise to another, and they all would make sense. He would weave in these ideas, and they were just like when he did the psychiatrist joke.
Yeah, the psychiatrist, yeah.
So
That's what I'm talking about, the other me. I found out he's the other me.
yeah, the other me, and why
Yeah.
should I pay him? He should be paying me. You know?
It's very convoluted. And
It makes sense though, but it makes sense.
Yeah,
What do you think of
very
it? And,
convoluted.
and
And he has to think about it now to record. He has so many of these things. He just doesn't go automatically into it. But it's hard work for him. I've seen him in the process of how he creates it,
oh,
and I've heard him sitting in the back of the car. He's sitting in front. Repeat a line maybe 30 or 40 times, one line, different ways, accenting it this way, accenting it that way. It's hard work, and he works very hard at it.
well, my
With telling jokes, yeah.
well, my dad understands all his Yiddish. He still
Yeah.
speaks it, my dad. I'm sure you speak Yiddish too.
A
You know,
little bit down to Jackie. But you know, Jackie was a rabbi. You
right,
know that?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I
He,
know.
he was an ordained rabbi.
I like how he does. He gets up there and he starts singing like a rabbi sometimes, you know, and like he's in shul, you know.
The first time I was at his apartment, it was a duplex apartment.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to concentrate on something on business, talking to his wife.
Uh-huh.
And I had only met him outside a delicatessen. I never knew him before. And there's this man going through the house, holding one hand to his ear, which my brother used to do too. Apparently, it's the way you could hear what you're singing. Davening, praying, singing. And he walks by and up past us, ignoring us, walks up the stairs till he disappears upstairs. But as he's walking by, his wife Jill says to me, ignore him, just ignore him. Well, let's go on with the talking. It's very hard to ignore somebody else's circumstance.
Wow, God, this is
He's very childlike. He's very naive in many ways. We're having dinner with a public official, and the guy is not black, but he's not white either. So I could see Jackie, something's going to happen because Jackie is staring, the guy staring at the guy, staring at the guy. And then Jackie turns to him during the push and says, listen, I'm trying to figure you out. Are you black or are you white? Now, first the guy is about to be offended, but then he sees Jackie looking at him. He's absolutely sincere. He doesn't understand this. Why? It's with a naivete about him. He's a childlike, almost naivete. But anyway, so I got to get back to my other profession, my day job.
oh, your day. God, this has been fantastic. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
You made my day. You really did.
Well, you made my day.
Oh well, thank you.
A little exhausted, but you made my day.
Well,
meet you. And
Yeah,
talk to you.
I hope we do. I hope we do. I've never been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Have you ever been there?
I've been there a number of times.
I've
And
never been there. I heard he has some exhibit there or something, somewhere in the thing.
if you're going to go there, we will meet you there. How's that?
All right, I'll let you know. You know who wanted to go there? Who's a fan of rock and roll? Is uh, uh, um, he was Secretary of Education. His name is Bill Bennett.
Oh, yeah.
Bill Bennett. He's a big aficionado of rock and roll.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
People. Okay, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Bell. Oh, you have
Bye-bye.
a good day. Thank you. Bye now. Bye-bye. What a great, great guy. Oh, man.